We're back, people. We got another episode going on. It's the Talkin TV podcast. I'm Dom. That's Chris. I'm not doing the pointing the fingers this time because I'm really sick of getting confused with these fucking camera directions. And Chris, first off, before we hop into today's topic, how you been, man?
I've been good, dude. You know, just sort of going through the motions of the day to day, trying to watch TV when I can.
Yeah.
But
I feel that struggle. I feel that struggle hard.
Emphasis on when I can.
Yeah, exactly. Like it sucks because I literally went from being able to watch TV literally all day, every day, to only being able to watch it like for only like a few hours out of my day. And even then I'm like, man, now I understand what like normal people have to deal with. Like this shit takes time and I have to watch movies too. Like how does anybody in I'm like, wow, no wonder the only people who are able to watch this much content are the people in our space who do this for a job, you know? No wonder, like, half the shit, like, half of the shit that we've heard of, nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. There's only so many hours in a day I'm learning lately.
Yeah, and, seriously.
It's very unfortunate. But, you know, Dom, thanks for asking. And, you know, not to be the rude one here, how have you been lately?
Well, why would you asking me how I've been make you the rude one?
If I didn't ask, rather.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
I mean, like I said,
damn, Dom asked Chris, but Chris didn't ask Dom. Okay.
Like, I mean, I'm still adjusting to my new schedule. I'm 4 weeks in now, and oh my god, I just realized that there's a reason why I wanted to leave waking up at 5 a.m. behind in my high school days, and now I have to do it again. And let me tell you something: 5 years is not as short an amount of time as I thought. And these waking up at 5 a.m.s, it's certainly started to take a toll on me. So that's all I'm going to say as far as that goes. The job is whatever. It's a job, but it's just, I'm like, why does it have to be at 5 a.m.? I could do 6. That's fine. That's easy for me. But 5, I'm like, ugh. And it'd be one thing if it was like once in a while, but it's every day. It's like, Jesus, can I get a break? But I like the bit that we started with about the whole watching TV thing and how there really isn't enough time in the day because people. So as you know, we started off this year, this very tumultuous, very all over the place, very, very depressing year, I would say, with a couple of top 10 lists that we did. We did what's it called? I got together with my buddies, Adam and Brandon, missed those guys. We covered we kind of broke down year by year some of the best movies of the last decade. Chris and I did our top 10 movies of last year. We also talked about all the A24 movies that we saw last year, which was an interesting batch to say the least. But one of my personal favorite top 10 lists that we kicked off the year with is our best TV shows. Because again, as we say, I am maybe the movie nerd, but that guy's sitting next to me is the TV nerd. And the show is called Talkin TV, after all. And it's funny because, Chris, I remember when we were first starting this show, and one of the biggest problems that we were having is you were just like, dude, if we're seeing a movie every weekend, where is there going to be time for TV? I'm like, I know, dude. And I was trying to come up with every other solution in the book to try and cover that. And I didn't know what to do. And then Corona happened and everything got shut down. And we all of a sudden had a lot more time for TV.
A lot more time.
Like, a lot. So with that being said, I figured that, again, since this was kind of a slow week and we didn't really have kind of a lot to talk about, we didn't really have any new movies that we particularly wanted to talk about. You know, I shouldn't say that, kind of back up and preface. We were supposed to do another movie this week, but needless to say, because of both current events and because of our own things happening with our own schedule, we decided to not do that movie, which shall remain nameless. All I'm going to say is that if you're going to pay $30 on a streaming service for a movie that's going to be free a month later, you're a moron, on top of many other things having to
I'm glad you said that because we actually can't say the name of this film because
we literally can't.
YouTube will ban us, but I'm talking about the terribly disgusting Netflix film they just put out. Yeah. Which I hate them for eternally. And that was not the movie in question. So
not at all.
I'm glad you put the very specific $30 price tag on it.
I was really confused there for a second. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. God, why would you bring that up?
No, I know. It just happens to be that like this week, every YouTuber is like talking about a Netflix movie that shall not be named, and you went with the shall not be named reference. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. I think the $30 thing differentiated it, but anyways, that's going to leave people very confused, and that's good. But we're here to do something that was similar to something that I did last summer, only on the movie side of things. So for anybody who's not familiar with, on my old channel, Movie Nerd Reviews, I did the Morgan J. Freeman Awards at the end of earlier this year, around the time when the Oscars happened, in order to cover the best of the movies in last year. And as you guys know, I did something similar a couple weeks ago with the Talkin TV Awards in order to honor the best in TV for this past TV season. But so Last year, leading up to the Morgan J. Freeman Awards, me and the guys got together. We kind of did like almost this weird little halfway podcast where we kind of just talked about all the movies that we'd seen so far that year and basically broke down our noms. We were there for like 3.5 hours. Needless to say, we don't have that much time today, but I wanted to do something similar to that today because, again, this being the Corona year, that still has somehow not prevented us from being able to watch a bunch of new TV shows. So with that being said, Chris, are you ready to divulge to them finally what it is the topic that is today?
Well, today we're sort of doing like a TV recap is what I would sort of call it. Like
pretty much the best way I feel like.
Up until this point in time right now, 2020 TV recap, specifically 2020. I mean, sure, there's old shows I've watched this year, like Curb Your Enthusiasm and stuff, but like we're not talking about those today. We're talking about 2020 shows.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the funny thing is that I think Curb has a new season coming out, but I don't remember if that's this year or next year. But I know it hasn't come out yet, and this is going to be its 11th season, which is insane to me.
Insane, yeah.
But so basically the way that this show is going to work format-wise is we're basically going to, Chris and I have still watched a decent amount of TV shows, not as much as we would have liked to, because again, I'm just looking at my list of TV shows that I've watched this year just compared to last year alone, and it is like my list of TV shows from last year is like this long, and my list of TV shows from this year is like this long. So that should give you guys like a little bit of a visual reference there. But so basically, we're gonna break down some of the shows that we've seen because there are shows that I've seen that Chris has not, and there are shows that Chris has seen that I have not. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna each break down the shows that we have seen individually, talk about them a little bit, in order to fill that hour slot time. And then we're basically just going to run through and break down every TV show that we've seen so far this year, what we liked about it, what we might not have liked about it, and whether it stands a chance of making our top 10 at the beginning of next year's podcast. So without further ado, Chris, you want to get into this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, how do you want to start this, man?
I figure we'll kind of, like I said, you said it yourself. You have 3 shows that you've seen that I haven't. I have 4 shows that I've seen that you haven't. I'd say just... do you want to bounce back and forth, or do you want to just go through them all at once?
I think we could bounce back and forth.
All right, cool. So in that case, you start off because you're the TV nerd.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna throw out there that the first show, and I have these. I mean, do you have yours ranked in any specific order?
I don't have these ranked. This is more so of just like a loose freeform discussion. I have not.
Yeah,
ranked them yet.
Me too. So I mean, let's start off on a strong note. Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one that we've both seen. I thought we were doing individual ones.
Oh, okay. Sorry. A lot of words were said there, and
yes, there were.
It's a little confusing. Yeah, no. So for me, I guess there's just 3 shows that I've seen that Dom hasn't seen, to my knowledge. The first would be Kim's Convenience, season 4. For those of you guys who don't know, Kim's Convenience is a CBC show, Canadian Broadcast Channel show. It's a comedy about Korean immigrants raising, first generation American kids who are around Dom and I's age, and sort of the meshing of values and them coming from, an Eastern culture to a Western culture, and sort of the ups and downs of being an immigrant parent in Toronto, Canada. And it's a sitcom. So of course, all hijinks ensue, and it's really good. It's got such a charm to it. Simu Lee is going to be in one of the upcoming Marvel films as the lead, and he is one of the staples of that show. He plays the older brother. And dude, the show is just like, to say there's one main character would be sort of to take away from the rest of the cast. It's truly a true ensemble cast, and each character you kind of get to learn and grow with as they go along. And I think it's just an incredibly charming show. It's on Netflix, distributed to the US through Netflix rather. So, check. It's got a few different deals worldwide. I was looking up for people out there. I say give it a shot. If you like sitcoms, if you like good family drama comedies, this is for you. So.
Yeah, you've talked about this show a lot. You've tricked me a couple times into thinking that it was going to be a certain other CBC show. But yeah, you've talked a lot about the show. And real quick, just remind me, the guy who's going to be playing, is he going to be the one that's playing Shang-Chi?
That is correct.
All right, got it. Just wanted to make sure that I got it right. Yeah, that's literally the only thing that I can say is that you've talked a lot about the show. I've not seen a single frame of this, so I have no comments, unfortunately, to offer. So yeah, next on your list of shows that I have not seen from this year.
Oh, so if I'm keep going then.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if this counts as a show, but it was a 3-part special on Netflix called Middleditch and Schwartz, which is an improv sketch.
That counts. If SNL counts, that counts.
Yeah, and it's getting renewed for another season. They're calling it season, so I guess it's a show, but really it's just, Thomas Middleditch of Silicon Valley fame, amongst many other things, and Ben Schwartz of Parks and Rec fame, amongst many other things, sort of showing their improvisational skills chops. I mean, they're both UCB students, and if you don't know what UCB is, go and look it up. It is a legendary sketch and improv comedy troupe. They have chapters all over the country, and some of the biggest names come out of there. And these are some of the more recent bigger names, as they're generally younger guys. And it's absolutely hilarious just to see how talented they are and how they can weave storylines out of thin air. Because the thing about this thing that really impressed me is it's not just like randomness. It's randomness, but they're building a narrative and developing characters improvisationally on the spot, and they reach a story climax and arc and endpoint. And it's just really impressive. And it's cool to see two actors that I very much so enjoy kind of showing a different side of their chops.
So would you say that this is kind of like a mix between like a stand-up special, a sketch show, a stand-up special, and a sketch show? Because that's kind of the vibe that I was getting when I watched the trailers for this. I watched the trailers for this, and I didn't really know what to expect. I just saw, John Ralphio and Richard from Silicon Valley. That's pretty much like all that Thomas Middleditch plays. And like they're
Except
just
for
like
being the Verizon guy.
Yeah, well, that too. But yeah, even then, I'm like, oh, Richard. But yeah, like, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And so that's kind of like why I'm like, and also, like I said, my thoughts on just anything comedy now aside. Would you think that it would be something that I could get out of it is the question.
I mean, yeah, if you want to see talented people do something that is very impressive, then yeah, I think anyone who appreciates art, because I would call this avant-garde theater, to be completely honest with you, because there's no props. There is literally, like, when they are pretending to sit in a chair, they are squatting using muscles to like maintain that sitting in a chair thing. It is just completely free form. And it's kind of why I love podcasting, is why I like this special, because it's no holds bars. Whatever the moment brings you to is where you go. So if you like that type of art form, yeah, like outside of the box type art form, then yeah, 100%. Check it out.
Interesting. I'm not going to lie. This is not where I was expecting you to go. All right. And then your last one that you've seen that I have not?
Yeah. So I actually have two more now. I forgot. So one is Ricky Gervais's Afterlife, which I feel like I've spoken about a few times on the show. It's an awesome show. It's incredibly depressing. The log line is Ricky Gervais's character sort of is coping with his wife, who recently passed away from cancer, and he's literally learning how to deal with life after her life. And so it's sort of like through him failing to commit suicide, he realizes that it would have been terrible if he committed suicide, because he goes on to like sort of help other people, and also, of course, other obstacles come in his way. It's not all fun and games for Ricky Gervais after he overcomes this. It's so weird because it's so twisted and it's so dark, but it makes you feel so good. But it's terrible, like the scenarios and the things that happen to all of these characters. But it's just another one of those like family sort of interwoven, because the characters become a family, but they're not genetically related. And it's like kind of like an Office or like a Parks and Rec type thing, where like at the end of those seasons, or even Community, right? Like at the end of like the show, you're like, oh man, I watched these guys grow and become like so much more than just friends in the study hall. And so it's got that type of sitcom charm to it that I think is like, if more eyes were on it, it would be talked about more. But you know, Netflix doesn't market anything, so whatever.
At least you're starting to understand why I hate them so much, Netflix. But yeah, from what you made it sounds like a typical Ricky Gervais thing, which is that it's great and it's so naturally him, which is pretty much everything that he's ever done. Like, because that's the one thing I've learned to love about Ricky, is that he does not let anyone tell him what to make with his content. So yeah,
he's the director, he's the producer, he's the writer. So it's 100% a passion project. And then the last show is a show by a comedian called Mae Martin. She put out an incredible show on Netflix this year. 6 episodes, 23 minutes each. It's called Feel Good. And dude, let me tell you, it is just absolutely phenomenal. I can't even explain it. It's like one of the greatest love stories I've literally ever seen in my entire life. So
yeah, you told me a lot about this show, and it sounds like it's something right on my alley. Because, like I said, I've said multiple times that I'm not a fan of certain genres. I'm not a fan of rom-coms or romance of any kind, unless it's coming of age teen, or unless it's British. Because pretty much anything British, I love. And I know that show Fleabag, the Phoebe Waller-Bridge show, got a lot of eyes on it last year. And so, did you hear anything about that show? Like only because the only reason why I'm asking is because you think that this show would like kind of compare to that show.
Well, this show is an English show, and
well, that was too. That's why I'm asking.
I've never heard anything about that show. I will check it out. But the one last thing I want to add about Feel Good is that it's like one of those shows that makes you just want to like create something after watching it, which not many shows do, to me at least, inspire me enough to want to like create something. that's just how moving it is, in my opinion. So
That's impressive.
all
right.
My number one show of the year so far.
All right.
Spoiler alert.
That's impressive. Yeah. Mine we'll get to, because again, mine is another one that I know for a fact you have not seen. So those are your 4, which again, you lied to me because you said it was only 3. And I'm like, wait a minute.
I just had a show because you towards some left.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm like, because you said the first 2, but then I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, you have that other British show in addition to Afterlife, which I knew you were going to give a shout out to. So you fooled me there. I like it when you do that though. So I like my lying co-host have 4 shows that I wanted to talk about, but again, I'm not going to talk about these shows for too long because I think that of these 4, there's only one of them that I actually genuinely love. The other 3, I came out of them and I had infinitely different mixed reactions to. The first one is Hollywood, which is Ryan Murphy's first of his 8-picture deal that he signed with Netflix, which, again, Ryan Murphy basically made FX the household name that it is with shows like American Horror Story, People vs. O.J. Simpson, Feud, and a bunch of other Pose, which I know he executive produced, and a bunch of others that I can't remember off the top of my head. And this is the latest in his installments on alternative history, LGBTQ relations in the US, and just his flair for the dramatic, as I like to say, because if there's one thing that I have likened to Ryan Murphy as a creator, it's that he loves to take nonsense and make it sound important. But this is weird because it's a little bit down the middle where it's taking the alternative history approach with looking at the golden age of Hollywood, but almost from like an alternative lens, kind of like what Quentin Tarantino did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it's like almost like a wish fulfillment phase where it's like, oh, this is what would have happened if like Hollywood wasn't notoriously racist at the time. And the one thing I'll say is that it's not the best show that came out this year, but I thought it was entertaining. I'm very 50-50 hit or miss when it comes to Ryan Murphy stuff. Sometimes I really enjoy it. Sometimes I really can't not stand it. And this is one that was literally just right in the middle, where I'm like, I enjoyed the lightness and the fluffiness of it, keeping in mind that I watched it right in the middle of when Corona was going on. I actually like the majority of the performances. Another Ryan Murphy thing that has got a tremendous cast. You got people like old school stars like Patti LuPone, Holland Taylor, Jim Parsons, Dylan McDermott, what's his name? Joe Mantello. Rob Reiner has a little cameo in this, along with a bunch of other new up-and-coming stars. Darren Criss, who is a Ryan Murphy regular. Samara Weaving. What's her name from Spider-Man? Laura Harrier. But for me, the standout was easily the kid who played the writer in the show, Jeremy Pope, who actually just got an Emmy nomination for it, rightfully so. But yeah, it's not the best show that I've seen, but it's a fun kind of waste of time, like turn your brain off kind of a show. And I hate using that term, but I find that I'm using it more and more. So after that, then the next show that I watched that I've surprisingly enjoyed a lot more than I thought I was going to is The Umbrella Academy Season 2 on Netflix. I talked Chris's ear off the other day about this show and it's so strange because I was in a really weird place because the whole reason why I didn't watch this show when it was on Netflix originally last year was because I thought that it was like a lot of other Netflix stuff. It was going to have a lot of Netflix tropes that I just could not stand, like the soap opera elements of it, the spending almost a majority, like 40 to 45 minutes of every episode's run just talking because they clearly don't have the budget to shoot any cool effect stuff. And then when the effect stuff does happen, it like lasts for like 5 minutes and they're doing everything they can to cut around it.
So like CW on Netflix?
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is like things like Sabrina and all that stuff?
Pretty much. But the one thing that I will say that I think this show has over every other one of these types of shows on Netflix, again, it's a big reason why I started to get sick of the Marvel Netflix shows after a time, is because this show, I think, actually has, it does have a sense of fun, which a lot of the other shows don't. I think the characters are actually well thought out and interesting characters. I think they actually take what was a pretty straightforward, set, cut and dry premise from the first season. They actually kind of expand upon it, like they time travel back to the 60s in this season, and they actually have a lot of fun with that premise. I think the jokes are funnier. I think the zaniness is even zanier. I think they do more with the kids' powers. The basic elevator pitch that I give to somebody in order to pitch this to people is that it's basically X-Men if the X-Men were like, if Professor X was an asshole and like basically kidnapped these kids as little kids and basically mentally scarred them growing up. And it really shows. I think the performances are better for the most part all around. I'm sometimes the biggest fan of all the actors. Robert Sheehan with the show went from being my least favorite actor of 2018 to being the best part about the show, which is still insane to me. And again, if you were a fan of this first season of this show, I think you're going to like this season even more. So that's The Umbrella Academy. My third show is On My Block, which is an adorable little show that, again, is basically the equivalent of kind of those Disney Channel sitcoms that I grew up really enjoying, you know, your Shake It Ups, your Sweet Lives of Zach and Cody's, all that. But the big key difference is that this show never once lost sight of kind of where it took place, which is that it is very clearly taking place in the hood suburbs of LA, and it has a primarily minority cast, with the entire cast is all African American and Latino, and these kids are an incredible batch of young actors that they've gotten. It kind of kills me that they only talk about Stranger Things and not this batch of young actors, because they really do a good job here. And this season is just yet another continuation of walking that really fine line between like having some really goofy, zany, insane sitcom comedy, also having like some really awful, like tragic moments, because there was a lot of gang and violence stuff that happens in this show, and it does not hold back when it comes to that. So that's on my block. So those are 3 shows that, again, they were all fairly enjoyable. I was able to like kind of turn my brain off and enjoy all of them. But the number one show that to me is still my absolute favorite show of the year. It sucks that this show had to leave us, but it went on the absolute highest of highs. And it kills me because this finale I watched like right around the time that the Clone Wars finale happened. And I was like, oh, goddamn, now we have 2 animated shows that are arguably like 2 of the greatest animated finales that I've seen. And this, as of right now, is still my favorite show. And it's the last season of BoJack Horseman. They did such a good job wrapping the show up, wrapping the arc of this insanely kind of very split down the middle, very morally gray, very all over the place, like hateable, but also likable character. The voiceover cast is still all great. Everything that you loved about the show is still there. They did with this show kind of what they did with the last season of Breaking Bad, the last season of Mad Men, last season of Sopranos, where they technically it's all one season, but they split it up into 2 parts. Part 1 aired in October of 2019, and then part 2 aired in January of this year. So it's technically the last 8 episodes of the show. And the thing that I always liked about this show, and the reason why to me I kind of hold this above your normal caliber of animated adult TV shows, which is that this show was never interested in just being a comedy and just delivering us the same types of jokes every single week. This show was actually interested in having a lot of depth, a lot of surprisingly deep and dark subject matter. It actually wanted to make a statement. It actually wanted to examine its characters over the course of these 6 seasons. And just if you're talking about BoJack as a character, the thing that made this last season so compelling is that BoJack, throughout the entirety of the show, has constantly found himself between a rock and a hard place, and that every single time he's tried to make a change, something else has come up where he does something that prevents him from doing that. And he usually puts him a lot of steps back, to the point where it's almost parodying the idea of the traditional sitcom, which is that whether these characters can actually grow and change, you know? But the thing that was so impressive to me about this season, and technically the last season as well, the first half of season 6, is that BoJack, this is the first time where you actually see BoJack taking steps to actually try and make some meaningful changes in his life. And to the point where it actually almost fools you into thinking that he does. Like by the time this season starts off, he's very well settled down. He's very much like planning to go on to the next stage of his life and actually do something. But there are just those little things that are lurking in the background of his past that might not let him. And to me, I was saying how The Boys season 1 was probably the best examination of the Me Too movement that I've seen. But specifically this second half of this season takes it in a whole new light. So that's all I'm going to say about it. It's currently still my favorite TV show of the year. It's the last season of BoJack Horseman, easily. So
yeah, I'm definitely going to watch that by the time we do our top 10.
Dude, I'm telling you, you got to get caught up on it. Like I didn't think, I'm like, I watched season 4. Can I do it? You know, because I'd already had 3 seasons, because I had all of season 5 in addition to the last season to catch up on. And then by the time I did it, I'm like, okay, I got to get through this. This is amazing. So with that being said, Chris, you ready to jump into our combined list now?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So you started it off technically before we did the individuals, but I feel like, again, if we're just breaking it down in chronological order of all the shows that we've watched so far this year, we kind of have to start it off with Clone Wars. I mean,
that's where I was going to go. That was where I was going to go.
It was the first big thing that we watched this year. We did 2 podcasts on it, covering the premiere and the finale. It's funny, I was actually just listening to that finale episode that we did the other day, and really? Man, I forgot what a great episode that was.
Yeah, it holds up. Huh?
Oh, it holds up, and just like a fine wine. It's funny because the whole thing that I remember hearing is that a lot of people were saying, okay, we don't really care about the first 8 episodes. It's those last 4 episodes that are really where the meat and potatoes of this season are. And I have to say that the more and more I think about it, I couldn't disagree more, because you needed those first 8 episodes. Specifically, again, if you had never watched a single episode of the Clone Wars, because this is both for new viewers of Clone Wars and returning viewers who had watched the original run of the show, that you kind of needed the first 4 episodes to establish, like, kind of get you back into the world of Clone Wars with the clones and with Anakin. And then you need those second 4 episodes in order to caught up with Ahsoka and kind of see her struggle that was going to lead her into her decisions in those last 4 episodes. And yeah, it was a really powerful season just for us as fans of Star Wars, having come off of that, again, that movie that shall not be named, because frankly, I'm sick of giving a name to it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
I
just
agree.
it was really refreshing, and it was just an awesome way to kick off the year before Corona came in and ruined everything.
Yeah, and I was on the side of had only seen that season, but at the time we covered it. So, if you guys go back and listen to our episode, you'll see that we have like that dichotomy that they were sort of marketing the show for. It was very inviting as much as it was a conclusion to something that so many people had been invested in for such a long amount of time. And I think that really is a testament to the writing and Filoni understanding the characters and just servicing these characters in the way that just felt so natural and organic, like giving every single one of these characters that, whether you feel about the prequels a positive or a negative light, in regards to the way Filoni treated them and gave them purpose and meaning behind every step and action they took, I think you kind of left feeling way more fulfilled. Even if you thought the prequels were great, like me, you left feeling way more fulfilled from these characters' performances in 8 episodes of an animated, or 12 episodes of an animated show than you did with 3 feature-length movies. So yeah, if you like Star Wars and you're afraid to check out this animated universe they have, as much as I hate to say, go get a Disney Plus subscription, go get a Disney Plus subscription and check it out.
Yeah, and check out Rebels too if you get a chance, because I'm halfway through season 2 of that show still, and that show, while to me I still like Clone Wars better, is still pretty impressive. Now it really sucks because as I look more and further down this list, I gotta say, I think Clone Wars might be the best one that we've covered, at least so far, for the ones that we've seen in its entirety. Because the more and more
we used it up now.
I looked down this list and I'm like, God damn, this is. I know you said that like TV came to play this year, but I'm looking at this list and I'm like,
I've been thinking about that statement. I don't know where I quite stand on that.
Like,
I mean, just because movies have been so pathetic that TV at least has been something. Like Clone Wars was brilliant.
Honestly, if I had to pick and choose, I think I gotta go with movies. And I'm not just saying that because of the movie, or because just as far as our next 2 entries go, like we got Westworld season 3 next, which. When this show, it's funny because when I saw the trailers for this show come out, I was like, okay, this seems to actually be taking the direction that I thought season 2 was going to be going in. This could actually be cool. We're finally actually seeing them interact with the human world. What are they going to do in the human world? Now that a couple of these robots come out, I saw it was a drastically shortened cast, drastically shortened episode count, and I'm like, and again, after having concluded the season, I have to say, because I'm going to try and give at least one positive thought to each and every one of these shows. Whether I like them or not is a different story, which is that, okay, at the very least, I think that the ideas that they were going for were pretty cool, kind of showing how like the regular average humans aren't that different from the hosts, as far as they're kind of just all pieces in like this one big mastermind's overall machine, and kind of the illusions of the character of Sirach to Dr. Ford and all of that. All the ideas were there. The problem is the actual execution of it, because for 8 episodes, Chris, I don't know if you can agree with me or not, but how the hell did this feel like more of a drag than the actual 10 episode seasons, which people actually complained were long and boring?
I mean, listen, we love having frequent guest Patrick Huber on the show, but like,
what was he smoking with this episode, with this season? I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
I still don't get it.
I don't get it. And honestly, I don't ever, I mean, I guess we might cover season 4, but
if it ever comes back, but I'm
not looking forward to it at all. Yeah, we just said that in tandem because that's how bad
that's how in sync we are as far as our thoughts on this show.
This show sucked. Next show.
Yeah, it was really bad. Like, and here's the thing. I didn't like season 2 as much as the first season, but at the very least, I still regarded it as a good season of television. This was not that. Like, the production looked messy. The visuals were great, but the storytelling to back it up was all over the place. They completely misused certain characters. Some very strange performances. I thought, again, I even said in the first episode that we covered, I liked some of the newcomers, but again, just another tragic use of Aaron Paul. Like, and this thing that sucks is that they're clearly setting him up to like take over as the main character from Dolores. But like with what they gave for him, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't give a shit about continuing to watch Aaron Paul in this show. Like, not at all. So yeah. So I don't know about you. I just want to move on. Like we dedicated 2 episodes to that show. And it was 2 episodes too many, but as far as I'm concerned. But this season, again, it's a little bit of an interesting one because it's one of those shows where this season kind of made me look back on the first 2 seasons of the show, which I would say for the most part I enjoyed. I know you were not a big fan of it. And it's funny because there are people that I know that like this show and people that I know that hated the show. But the funny thing is that the people who I was would be more inclined to trust as far as viewing quality goes were on the side of hating the show. And with this season, I started to notice some of the problems. And that is, and again, another 3rd season that popped up. That is the 3rd season of a very popular show that popped up in the last few years, that being Ozark. Very famous Jason Bateman crime drama on Netflix. And It's funny because again, just as far as my relationship with this season goes, because structure-wise, this season didn't give me anything that was necessarily different from the last two seasons. But for some reason, I just found myself way more bored with this season, way less invested in the struggles of the characters. This was very much so a background noise episode, to the point where when we did our podcast episode on this, I was like, I feel like I have nothing else to say. Like, I legitimately can't talk this much about this season, you know? And so kind of, Chris, maybe you can clue me in as to like why that is, you know? Because like because I still, for the most part, I think, I don't know, but like I still very much enjoyed the first two seasons of the show. So like, what is it about this third season that like kind of like threw me off a bit, you know?
I mean, I think that this third season, if you liked the first two seasons of this show, kind of for those of us who really had never cared for the show, was just a great way to open your eyes to the fact that, oh, the show really is just spinning its wheels, and it really is just like trying to just capitalize on that like need for another Breaking Bad type show. And, you know, but it doesn't offer anything special. It's just going and it's going, and it's not fulfilling, you know, it's not a fulfilling watch. You don't leave there feeling like the 10 hours you spent with each season was worth your time. In fact, you're like, man, I feel like I just watched some schlock for like, you know, 30 hours of my life.
Yeah.
And I could have read a good mystery novel in half the time and gotten, you know, or like a drug running novel. I'm sure there's brilliant ones out there, and gotten more value out of that, or quite frankly watched another show in the similar vein.
Or I was about to say, or just rewatch Breaking Bad.
but I think to answer your question, Bateman's character kind of really took a nosedive this season.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that's the way the writing went. You know, it was a little less about him and more about the family unit and them adapting, but I just don't think his supporting cast quite stepped up the way that they had to.
So. And it's funny because there were characters in the supporting cast who, for the most part, I enjoyed the first two seasons, and they just didn't do it for me. Like Wendy, I never really liked Wendy that much, but this is the season where she really started to show her true colors. Is like, oh, wow, you are just bad. So you're the one that's going to be bad news here, you know? And it's funny because Ruth, for the most part, I thought she was a pretty compelling character the first couple seasons. Here, she started to annoy me. The kids, I think the only one of these characters that I actually enjoyed was the son, Jonah. The brother character who they brought in, everyone loved him. I'm like, get this guy out of here. This guy's a terrible actor. I don't believe his accent for a second. This guy's awful. The one remaining, it's funny because they killed off, I think the problem that I'm realizing is that they killed off to me three of the best characters on the last season, which that being the FBI guy, Petty, which say what you will about him, that guy was a very interesting character to say the least. Jacob, who, because it's Peter Mullen, and Peter Mullen's awesome, and Buddy, who is the MV friggin' P of the show. And they killed all three of those characters off last season. So, like, what are you left with this season? You got the brother, who's lame. You got the Janet McTeer character, who apparently was so forgettable and so expendable that they literally just axed her off at the end of the season. And then the new kind of drug lord who they brought in to try and replace Dell from the first season, who was so awesome. He was such an awesome villain that they literally couldn't even keep him around for the rest of that first season. Right. So that was that. And yeah, that kind of shows the trajectory of where this show's going. And this next season is going to be the last. And the only thing that I have to say to that is thank friggin' God, because at the very least, we don't have to wait for more seasons to trudge through after this next season. So yeah, that's our Ozark conversation. And yeah, I think we can just leave it at that. Wow, man.
Go check the replay. We did a whole couple episodes on it.
Unfortunately. That one we only did one episode on. Thank God.
Oh, right. We just did because it's Netflix. Because it's Netflix. You gotta binge them all.
Yeah,
right.
But the next one we did one episode on, but I'm really happy that we did this one because again, this is giving another shout out to our home area. Another shout out to me, I would say an actually really well thought out and to me really introspective and thought-provoking type of a show, which is what we usually expect from HBO. But the interesting thing about this show is that I never knew, everyone, you couldn't go 2 feet in our area without hearing about the show. They're like, oh, the new Mark Ruffalo HBO show, it's like those two words, Mark Ruffalo and HBO, and that's all you needed. But to me, the third name that I kept looking for is I'm like, okay, well, I have no idea who's doing this. But when I found out that it was Derek Cianfrance, the director of Blue Valentine and The Place Beyond the Pines, that opened my eyes, and I was like, oh, okay. So this is going to be something different. And after I watched the first episode of the show, I was sold. And so the next show that we both watched, Chris, you were unfortunately unable to make the episode of this where we interviewed my friend Brandon, who worked on the show, which is, I know this much is true. Again, shot right here in our hometown, our home area. And the more and more I think about it, I love this freaking show. I think the first half was significantly stronger than the second half. And I think the show ended on a little bit of a whimper, just a little bit. I think it was a little bit too emblematic of the third season of True Detective. But for what this show was kind of able to examine as far as mental health goes, as far as family lineage goes. It got a little bit, I feel like, long at points. I definitely felt like this is like a 4-episode series that kind of got stretched out into 6. But for my money, the great points of this show shined above all else, namely in Ruffalo's performance and in the supporting cast. Again, a lot of really unexpectedly great performances that I was not expecting. Rosie O'Donnell and Catherine Hahn, who are 2 actresses that I had not seen dramatic performances of this caliber from, really, really impressed me. Again, it was cool spotting all the sites from our hometown that I'm like, I know that location, I know that location, I know that location. But yeah, this is a really introspective show. Like you said, it was deep. It was very dark. It was very, very depressing. Like every other minute of this episode, it was like trying to pull something out of the woodwork where it's like, oh God, what's the next thing that's going to happen to these guys, But the thing I liked is that it never really became that show. It was always a show that was like, no, this is just the story, and it kind of never got away from that, which is something that I really, really appreciated, because so many shows now you see just kind of specifically with HBO fall into that gimmick of like, what is their meme catchphrase going to be? And this show never really fell into that for me, which I very, very, very much appreciate.
Yeah, contrary to Dom, guys, I usually don't watch these types of shows because I find them quite hard to get through and honestly quite full of themselves, especially with messaging as heavy as this and with how slow-paced they are. And I love slow-paced, dramedies, dramas, and all that type of stuff. I mean, I just told you guys earlier, my number 1 contender for show of the year this year is quite so that. It's not very eventful. To further elaborate, while I did say it was 23-minute episodes, they're heavy, okay? And this show's heavy too, but it's a different kind of heavy. But there's a lot in there that's good, though. I think if you can get through this watch, which is a challenging watch, and which I think strikes a chord with a lot of people personally, whether you know people like this or people who have been through this, or you yourself are going through something similar, because although it's not talked about as much in the forefront these days as other sort of like pressing social issues, mental health is a big one still. And so it's, if you can get through all that, because it's heavy, it's, it's a lot to sift through, and you got to pay attention during this one as well. It's not one of those you can text every 5 minutes and look away. So if you're in for that, and you can accept it for that, and accept the pace that's a little slower, and I would dare say a little more traditional of TV, and a little less of the bells and whistles of the rapid pace that streaming has kind of changed our mentalities. And so if you can get your goldfish mentality a little bit out of the way here and focus on something, I think it's worth the watch. And that's coming from someone who had to do that. So just being honest and letting everyone know that, like, it's going to be a little difficult, especially if you're a product of this generation like Dom and I, but it's worth it. So
absolutely, yeah. No, I like the goldfish metaphor there. That was a pretty accurate one. It was a pretty interesting one. Yeah, people, this is a great show. Again, it's one of the most introspective and thought-provoking shows that I've seen so far this year. And even though, like I said, it's not a perfect show to me, but it comes as close to it as we can. Now, unfortunately, we got to jump ship to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, literally right back where we started. Again, I was listening to this episode the other day, and oh man, this was a fun episode to record, not a fun show to watch, because oh man, for, again, the spiritual successor to The Office and Parks and Rec, and clearly Netflix's attempt to capitalize on the force of The Office, we unfortunately had to sit through what felt like 10 hours when it was really only, like 6 hours, 7 hours total? Was it? Yeah, but it felt like that. Too much. That's Space Force. Again, Michael Schur and Steve Carell, because not Michael Schur, Greg Daniel and Steve Carell
there you go.
Yeah, co-producing credit, co-creation credit on this, in their very poor attempt to go for more of a darker satirical edge while also mocking the current state of politics. I don't know what their problem was, as far as like whether they just were too scared to go into the areas that they needed to in order for the show to work, or if they just weren't smart enough to pull off the type of humor that this show needed to work.
Well, I've been thinking about it a lot.
Me too. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
I think what it is that they thought they went so far into this rabbit hole, but really they're such a product with themselves, so trained to only think what they're allowed to think and only say what they're allowed to say, that what they thought was risky, the rest of us people who, don't just take one news article and take that for fact. We go and read a bunch of different articles because we know that everyone has their own bias, and we need to formulate a very honest opinion if we want to truly honor anything, we're like, well, you didn't do that at all. You just kind of pandered. They pandered, is what I think it was.
Not to mention the fact that we're,
off, but,
we're no, you didn't cut me off. Which is that we're a generation that is literally inundated with the 24-hour news cycle, especially now in the COVID cycle. So for them to know that, because again, for them not to know that, again, just shows that they lack the common sense that is so very much missing from The Office. Wonder why that show was such a success. And it just shows that, they completely lack common sense in order to understand that, we as viewers are smart enough to understand when we are getting good satire and when we aren't. And so for this show to kind of not do everything it needed to do as far as do that in order to be anything less than great is just kind of sad, especially for the people who have watched The Office like 30 times over and were kind of craving the next show from these guys. It's sad. Again, I've said it before. I'm not the biggest fan of The Office, as a very controversial Facebook post that I made a couple days ago stated. I'm much more so of a Parks and Rec guy than an Office guy. But I was excited to see the next thing for these guys. I like the cast. They have another tremendous cast. And again, it's another show where all the pieces were there to be great, but it was just clearly lacking, just like that one thing that it needed. And man, did it make this thing a chore to sit through, Like, I literally said on the podcast, I fell asleep during one of these episodes, and I should never, ever fall asleep during a Greg Daniel, Michael Schur show, So,
no.
As far as that goes, let's, again, it really sucks because as far as I went down this list, I'm like, man, we did not have as many good shows as we thought that we did this year. But the good news is that
chopping these shows apart.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that these last 3 shows, at the very least, it looks like those were the last couple bad ones we had to talk about, because these last 3 shows, 2 of the 3 are not finished yet. We're about halfway through with each of these shows, but I think it's safe to say that these last 3 shows, you and I, we loved these shows. We freaking loved all 3 of these last shows that we watched. And it sucks because the first show that we have, which hit like the last weekend of July, the first weekend of August, we released this episode. And even though August was like our most successful month as far as episodes go, we had our Spirited Away episode. We had our Legend of Korra episode, we ended it with our Cobra Kai episode,
which, by the way, are all on youtube.com.
All on YouTube. TV. On Talkin TV. And then we released this episode first, and we figured it would be hot. And nobody talked about or even watched the show. And we're like, what is wrong with you people? Did those Michael Bay movies just burn you like that badly that you just don't want to give anything Transformers a chance? Or was it, again, like I can so easily blame it on Netflix, where they just didn't market this, and because it wasn't like a big enough thing that people were talking about, like nobody knew about it? Because I'm talking about Transformers War for Cybertron Chapter 1 Siege. Granted, it probably didn't help that the title is that long, but Chris, this show, we both watched it, and our reaction was pretty much the same, and we're like, whoa, Transformers is back. This is like the next stage as far as like specifically Transformer storytelling goes. But it was also super fascinating in the sense of like, because it was creating like this, almost like this new sense of anime. Because I think they touted it as like an anime show. I think this is what it was classified, of Netflix officially classified it under. And it was just able to take these Transformers characters that we've grown up with, that we've known so well, and take these stories that we're for the most part very familiar with, and just take it and flesh it out in so many new and interesting directions. Like I was, for 6 episodes, I felt like I got an entire theatrical movie experience, and I was completely amazed. I watched it all in one day. The episodes were like 20 to 21 minutes each, and man, I could have taken like another like 2 hours of this. We've got 2 more seasons coming up, which if what they said about what they're going to do in these next 2 seasons is anything to be like to talk about, oh man, it's going to be nuts, to say the least.
Yeah, the show brought me back to something I spent a lot of my childhood watching, which was the original Transformers cartoons. I have the VHSs up on my shelf. I've shown them on the camera before, and I love the Transformers, man. I mean, I wasn't the biggest Michael Bay guy, but I enjoyed them in the television format for quite a bit of my upbringing as a kid, and also in the video game format. They really crossed over well there, and it was the classic Transformers, like the Cybertronian, the true origin of Energon and all that stuff, and we got that in this, and it was really cool. Like, I love Transformers when there's no humans around the most, because I feel like that's when they are just obviously them more so than
Wars
them.
Is the best Transformers property.
I'd agree with that, and they're not tiptoeing around killing humans every 5 steps, because quite frankly that could happen. Yeah, and so it's beautiful, it's great, and I don't know why anyone watched this. And you know what? I will blame Netflix. Netflix sucks, and that's probably why.
Thank you. So. At the very least, I finally made you understand that Netflix is the worst.
I get it. Trust me.
But yeah, no, this was absolutely amazing. For anyone that hasn't watched this show yet, I'd absolutely recommend going and watching it. It's awesome. It's super dark for a kid show. They actually get into the meat and the grit of what Transformers is at its heart, which is robots brutally killing each other. And who doesn't like watching that? So with that being said, Chris, these last 2 shows that I have on the list, unless you have something else that I was completely unaware of, it's funny because, again, these shows are not completely finished, but we're about halfway through each of them. You know, you've actually got another recap that you've got. By the time this episode comes out, it will have been completed for episode 5 of this one show, you know, and I feel like we can kind of talk about them in tangentials, you know, because I think I've noticed for the rest of the TV shows that are coming out for the rest of the years, they're kind of like blocking them off and putting them together. You know, I don't know if that's because Disney owns everything, you know, but I noticed that like The Boys seems to be running simultaneously with Lovecraft Country. And then by the time Fargo season 4 and The Mandalorian come back, those 2 are going to kind of be running simultaneously, like bookending the week. So I just find it interesting that the programs are doing that. But yeah, the last 2 shows that we're talking about are Lovecraft Country on HBO and The Boys season 2 on Amazon. I feel like we don't really need to talk too much about these shows because, again, you're doing a solo recap week by week on this. We've already done our episode covering the first 3 episodes of The Boys. In 4 more weeks, we will be covering the finale of The Boys season 2. But all I have to say on this is, well, first off, The Boys is everything that I wanted from season 2 and more, as far as like upping the ante, upping the ridiculousness, upping the hype factor, upping just how messed up and how continuously like fucked up and awful most of these characters are, and just the shenanigans that they and just how far they can go as far as deconstructing our love of superheroes. And as for Lovecraft Country, it's funny because I'm 5 episodes into this show so far. There are 5 episodes left, and I don't hate it, but I also don't love it probably as much as I feel like I should. And the reason why, and I'm going to be very coy about this because we're going to see where I am in 5 weeks when the show ends, is because I feel like I like the individual nature of each episode, how each episode feels like its own self-contained thing. The problem is I don't know how good of a job it does as far as being part of the greater whole of the season, which is something that for the most part HBO has always done really well. Like you saw it just like a couple months ago with Watchmen, or Watchmen, to me, the brilliance of that show was that each episode felt like its own like crazy movie while also being a really great part of the whole. You know, it's kind of like what HBO's like kind of made their trademark, is that you're getting a movie a week, you know, and then when you watch it all together, it makes this spectacular viewing experience. And I'm only halfway through, so I can't comment on it fully, but I don't know necessarily how it's going to factor into the whole, you know, as much.
Yeah, you know, I've been having a blast sort of like really dissecting this show. And it's the first of many of these week-to-week dissections that we're going to be doing, bringing guests on, getting a bunch of different people's opinions, and where you're going is kind of the general consensus from everyone, whether they articulated it in the same way you did or not. There is a bit of trepidation around all this, and I just have to wonder if it's, you know, the show being such a young creative team behind it. Sure, you have the guidance of Jordan Peele and J.J. Abrams, but the showrunner, this is really her first true outing, and I think she's doing a phenomenal job, but it's a little messy. And so if you want, I don't want to say too much because like I got to cover it week to week, and there's only so much you can say about this type of stuff. So I want to save the real meat and potatoes for the series we're doing here on the channel. Week-to-week breakdowns, thoughts, comments, feedbacks, whatever buzzwords you want to put on it of Lovecraft Country. But I think I'm having more fun analyzing it than I am watching it. And I'll leave it at that.
That makes a lot of sense. And it actually kind of goes into kind of a little bit of my problem with it, which again, I don't hate the show. It's not a bad show at all, but the amateurish angle really does kind of show. And I'm sorry, dude, but if you believe for 1 second that J.J. Abrams showed up a single day on set outside of like the preconception meeting, you're kidding yourself. Come on, man. You haven't learned from Lost by now? Come on. Now,
yeah, or Westworld.
Or Westworld, exactly. Which, yeah, exactly. You basically just made my point. Are you kidding me? Yeah, Jonathan Nolan directed the pilot. J.J. was never anywhere near that show. That's just a bad robot production, so he automatically gets credit on it. So we actually ran through those shows a lot quicker than I thought we would, only because again, it's just the shows that we have to deal with because this is COVID. So
with The Boys, I would just say, I'm loving it so far. It gives me something to look forward to on a Friday, and I hope you guys will join us when we cover the finale in a few weeks.
It's
good. I don't want to spoil anything because it's like one of the few shining, silver linings we have this year as far as content goes.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, I'm looking forward to that finale, dude. My thoughts on the last episode aside.
I did leave one thing out earlier. I also watched Dave on Hulu.
Yes, okay, there we go. I'm actually glad that you really brought it up. Yeah, because that's actually on my list of shows that I have yet to finish. I was actually going to give a quick shout out to some shows that I had yet to finish and some shows that had some release dates. So in our last 10 minutes, so I still have to finish these shows. Devs on FX and Hulu. Dave, the Little Dicky show. Is it Lil Dicky or Little Dicky?
Lil. Because he's a rapper, but I mean, that means little, so whatever.
It's weird. the sites that I watched on kind of screwed me over as far as that show goes, but I still really want to finish it. I've heard that it's great. The Eddie, which is the show on Netflix, starring Andre Holland. I didn't realize it when I first started watching it, but it's from the same creators as Skins, one of my favorite shows, so it has a similar setup format there. And Homecoming, the second season on Amazon. I really, really enjoyed the first season, which starred Julia Roberts. The second season, this new season, stars Janelle Monáe. And the first episode was really intriguing, and it seemed to bring back a lot of the feelings that I had as far as the first season goes. So I just hope that this season can deliver as far as that went. It's a shorter season. Now, as far as shows to look forward to, that we will have covered for most definitely 2 out of these shows that that I'm about to say, and I will personally be watching a couple more of these shows. So this coming Friday, actually 2 days after this episode is released, you've got Ryan Murphy's next big thing that he's putting on Netflix, Ratchet, starring Sarah Paulson, which is the prequel series about the origin of the Nurse Ratchet character from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Then you have Small Axe, which is Steve McQueen's new show that's coming out on Amazon. I believe it's a BBC production starring John Boyega and Letitia Wright about, I think it covers like the British side of what happened during the Jim Crow era in England. So that's going to be really fascinating to see. Fargo season 4, which I'm very, very happy that we're getting this year. I love Fargo. Fargo has probably been one of my favorite shows of this past decade. And the fact that we're getting this, it's another period piece similar to how season 2 was. Chris Rock is the star of this, and I think he is going to be absolutely phenomenal. This is going to be another season that's got a tremendous cast, and it's probably going to be full of even more zany shenanigans, even more really weird, dry humor, and even more violence than the first 3 seasons did. Obviously, the big one, which, can I officially announce it now? Because we kind of been hinting at it, and I kind of spoiled at it, but can we officially announce it now? Because this is our TV episode.
Do it.
I'm glad that you understood what I was talking about without even knowing a single thing. No, The Mandalorian season 2, guys, similar to what Chris has been doing with Lovecraft Country, we will be covering, and it'll be the both of us this time, not just him. We will be covering every Friday night. Make sure you keep that Friday night in place of our watch-alongs, because this is going to come right after our event that we have coming up in Halloween, which you guys will find out later on.
Oh yeah.
So starting on
sooner than later.
So starting on Friday, October 30th, with the debut of the first episode of The Mandalorian season 2, we will be covering each episode in a recap week to week. We will be going through what we liked, what we didn't like, whether Chris is still pissed about the show because it might continue to be the procedural that he hated about it in the first season. We're going to find out, but tune in. It's going to be on Friday nights only here on Talkin TV.
Yeah.
It's our Mandalorian cover show. We still have to come up with a cool title for that, because I really like Lovecraft Corner for your show. So yeah, we're gonna be doing that.
I will say, we're gonna have a lot of free time this winter, it's looking like.
Yes,
so
we are.
Go deep on this show.
I'm prepared, dude. I'm prepared, because like I said, we're busy right now, but that can all change come the winter. And like I said, we got a lot more projects coming up. And the last show that I wanted to give a shout out to real quick is his Dark Materials season 2, which I'm really glad that of all the shows that got pushed back, this show is coming back. The first season, it wasn't the greatest show, but as far as an adaptation of a book series that I very much enjoyed, that thank God didn't go to Netflix, I very, very much enjoyed it. They kind of took the British edge with it. The CG was actually really impressive, and for any fans of the trilogy of books that this is based on, that being the trilogy of books also called His Dark Materials, the first book, The Golden Compass, was adapted into a movie back in 2007, but that first season that came out last year was an 8-episode adaptation of that first book. And this new upcoming season 2, I assume, will be an adaptation of the second book in the trilogy, that being The Subtle Knife, which I'm actually currently reading in preparation for the show. So that will also be something that I'm very much looking forward to. Chris, do you have any other shows that you want to talk about, or other shows that you are looking forward to as far as the rest of the year goes?
I just forgot to say that Altered Carbon season 2 on Netflix, pretty big letdown. So
yeah, another one, man. Oh, this is going to be an interesting top 10, but it might end up being a top 5, but who knows?
It might,
yeah. So with that being said, that was it. That was all the TV that we've seen so far this year. That was a lot shorter of an episode than I thought it was going to be, mostly because every ranked list that we did before this was like an hour and a half long, and this one we were only here for 53 minutes. So, hey,
yeah, well,
if you guys haven't watched most of these shows, you're clearly doing yourselves a favor, because we were just gluttons for punishment, and also like just had to deal with what we got this year as far as TV went. So, yeah.
But also I'd like to ask the audience, if you watch these shows and you like them, A, what did you like about it? And B, are you going to watch the next seasons? And also, what did we miss?
Yeah.
What did
you guys get from these shows that we missed? Seriously, what do people love about that season of Ozark? I don't get it. I really don't get it.
And also, what did you watch that we didn't? Because these
Yeah,
aren't the
we'd love to
only
hear
shows
that.
that came out this
Yeah,
year.
we are
but-
guys. We are always looking for new content to watch. As you can see in the title, we are the Talkin TV podcast, not the Talkin Movies podcast like I originally wanted it to be. And yeah, like I said, it's again, this year was a very slim pickings as far as content went. We kind of had to go with what we could. And yeah, whatever suggestions you guys have, we are more than willing to go for it, assuming that we have time. You know, we don't have that many more shows that we're gonna watch for the rest of the year. So yeah, whatever suggestions you have, throw them in the comment section below. We'd love to hear them.
And if you wanted to let us know on social media, where can they do that, Dom?
They can do that on Facebook and Instagram at Talkin TV No G podcast, at Talkin TV podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Guys, we put up new content on our YouTube channel, which is just Talkin TV. Make sure you include that apostrophe. It's very important. No G, because the YouTube algorithm will probably send you someplace else. And we don't want that because we love you guys. And we're always looking for new people to join our ever-growing community. Guys, the year of 2020 is winding down. Thank fucking God this year is almost over. That's all I have to say there. And as always, we are always growing. We are always adding new things to our show. We've got a lot of things still planned for the rest of the year. We got a big event that we're still going to wait in order to tease just a little bit because we got to wait for the things to get a little spookier in the air is all I'm going to say. We've got a Mandalorian recap series. I've been taking a break these last couple of weeks from the top 10 list, but I've got a few more top 10 lists that I want to put out before the end of the year. Chris has definitely got some more solo content. I know somebody's got a Star Wars related No NPCs episode coming up on the horizon. And also, I'm definitely getting Ian back because if that Mortal Kombat watch along showed anything, it's that you and Ian, when you two go head to head on Microsoft versus Sony, is going to be even better than that goddamn South Park episode. It's going to be great. And yeah, keep coming back because we love you guys and we love having new fans because it's great. It validates us, I feel like, for many different reasons. Subscribe, hit the little subscribe button, hit the bell next to it. That way you get notified every time we put up new content on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And Chris, do you have anything you want to leave the people with?
Just a simple thank you. We appreciate it a lot. And it's a lot of fun doing this show. And we've been pretty stretched thin lately, but we're still making it happen because you guys are making it happen for us. So we appreciate being a part of this this relationship we have. And if you guys are a part of this relationship, you do know that there is one and only one way that we like to end this show here. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, my main man, Dom, aka the movie nerd Rizzy. Dom, do you have a final message to leave the people with here today?
Watch more fucking movies and TV, people. We out.